Now, this may shock you, but people are saying incorrect things on the internet.
Greatest economic growth was during the 50s.
50s, which I thought was a great time.
Do you know what the top tax rate in the 50s was?
Tax rates then were 80% or 90%.
Today, we're going to try to correct a little bit of that by tackling one myth. That myth: rich Americans paid 90% tax in the 1950s. You know, the 1950s, when everything was great. Except for the two recessions, constant threat of nuclear war, and polio. And also, all this cool stuff wasn't invented yet. Yet, people do think of it as a golden age. Now, literally every part of that meme is wrong, but we're just going to focus on the tax part. Okay, in the 1950s, rich Americans had a 90% tax rate, actually 91%. But that is true in the same way it's true that it was a felony to kill Bigfoot. Yes, both were technically laws, but Bigfoot didn't exist, and Americans paying 90% also didn't exist. That 91% was the top marginal rate, meaning it only applied to income above a certain threshold. Nobody's handing 90% of their check over to the government. Now, the threshold that it applied was above 200,000. That's 2.5 million today. So only income above 2.5 million, you could think, would have that 90% rate. So that's a very, very small part of the population that this tax even applied to. In 1955, it was about 10,000 households. That is 2% of the 1%. So we're talking a tiny portion that's even eligible for this tax. Now, let's say I'm in that small group. I'm making 300K in 1955. Life is good. Well, as good as life can be without monster trucks and Pop-Tarts. I want to avoid getting hit with the 90% tax on the 100K I'm making above 200,000. Now, if there's one thing Americans love, it's tax avoidance. In fact, up until 2011, the government would actually give you a patent if you came up with a new legal way to avoid taxes. Anyway, I gotta get my income down. Luckily, the IRS lets me deduct certain things from that income. Let's say I go on a vacation and I attend a seminar. Boom, that's a business vacation now, and I can deduct the whole thing. Maybe I go out to dinner and I mention the word synergy. Boom, that's a business dinner now, deduct it. My employer is gonna help me out too. This is the era that gave us company cars and expense accounts. So I might get paid a little less, but I'll get a sweet ride and a slush fund. So my vacations, my cars, my nights out, they're all in some way taken out of my taxes. Oh, yeah, and before 1962, the government didn't even require receipts. So who can remember what was spent where? I mean, look at this. Everything that you would possibly spend money on is either paid for by your employer or taken out of your taxes. I mean, what else could you even buy? Well, for me, of course, it would be Legos, but just use the Legos in a video. So these are business Legos. Deduct them. Now, by the way, in the 60s and 80s, as marginal tax rates were lowered, they closed all these loopholes or made it much more official and difficult to claim these things. So don't go to your accountant and be like, hey, take all my Legos out of my taxes, please. Bottom line is that people are clever and they respond to incentives. So that 90% rate and high rates across the income spectrum incentivized rich Americans and just regular people to find various ways to avoid them. And this led to a lot of waste. Accountants would spend time poring over the tax code, looking for loopholes instead of doing something more productive. The biggest loophole was that oil income was taxed less. So all the big Hollywood stars of the day were in oil. And according to sources, they would just be constantly talking about it. So if you think it'd be fun to go back in time and party with the Rat Pack, hope you like oil talk.
I got a new oil well, Sammy. Know what I named it? Crooner 1.
That's actually true. Frank Sinatra had an oil well named Crooner Number 1. For young people, Frank Sinatra was the BTS of his day. The other major loophole was becoming a corporation because corporate tax was lower. So Hollywood credits actually should have looked like this. Back to the myth. In the last year, the 91% tax rate was around, which was 1963. Only 501 people paid it, and it accounted for less than 0.1% of total tax revenue. So, like I said, almost nobody paid it, and it definitely didn't matter for government finances. So what were the rich paying back then? Well, research suggests that the average tax rate for the top 1% was around 42%. Today, it's about 36%. So it seems like it's gone down, but it's not as dramatic as people on the internet would make it seem. It didn't go from 90 to 0. Now, I'm not saying taxes should be higher or lower. I'm just begging, as an economist and a father to an impressionable young child, if you want high taxes, please don't bring up the 1950s as some high-tax utopia, because Bigfoot isn't real, and neither were people paying 90%.